Hello everyone. So on this video we are going to talk about chapter 2 on labor supply. So in this chapter we are going to introduce a theory, and this theory is actually very much related to the consumer theory that you studied in your microeconomics. So I think many of the equations are going to be very familiar to you. So in this chapter, we are going to basically talk about the labor supply. And when we talk about labor supply, in other words, it's like we are talking about labor participation rate. And there is a terminology used by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is called the labor force participation rate. And the labor force participation rate is offered as a statistic over time, and it's offered per gender, it's offered per race. And as I mentioned in our previous video, I told you that you will need to check the website of the Bureau of the Labor Statistics to know about the latest statistics about the labor market. So for example, when we check this slide, we are talking about labor facts, and the labor facts which is related to labor force participation rate per gender, and it's basically telling us that men labor force participation rate has declined all the way from 84% in 1948 to 65% in 2010. On the other hand, the women labor force participation rate has increased from 31% in 1948 all the way to 54% in 2010. As you can see, these are kind of outdated information, so that's why I always recommend that you follow the website of the Bureau of the Labor Statistics, which is the BLS, and they offer so many statistics, so you can just go to the search here all the way on top right, and you can just type whatever statistic that you are interested in, or whatever statistic that the chapter or the slide is talking about. So for example, here I typed the labor force participation rate, and as you can see, it's divided in terms of total, in terms of men. So if let's say if we are talking about total labor force participation rate, so this is the total, which is kind of the light blue line, which is the top one. But if I'm just talking about 16 to 19 years of age, then it's relatively lower, which is the green line. You can check it in terms of genders. So let's say in terms of men, labor force participation rate has decreased over time. The shaded region or the shaded bars are reflecting a recession time. So we have here the financial crisis, 2007-2009. We have also the other bar, which is here, which is the COVID-19, right? And it's also affecting the labor market. I'm sorry, this one keeps like highlighting. We have it also for females, right? You have it per race: white, black, Asians, Hispanics, right? So you have different ways of looking at the labor force participation rate. So if you are looking at men, so men 20 years and older, it has steadily decreased, a big drop during the COVID-19, and then reaching, let's say the very latest observation is 70% in August 2024. Okay, so when we go to the slide, it's 70%, so you can update this information. It's about 70% in 2024. Okay, and you can also update the information about females. But the general trend is there is a decline in men participation rate, and there is an increase in the female participation rate. Also, another observation that you can check on the BLS is the length of average work week in the manufacturing sector has declined from 55 hours of work to just 41. So people divide their hours of work, let's say per day, between working and non-working, right? So you're going to your work, or you're not going, doing other things, sleeping, or just going out, or whatever. All right, but in general, the average work week in terms of hours has declined from 55 to 41 hours per week. It's like people have started to appreciate leisure time or non-labor time. Important statistics that you will find on the BLS is the computation of the labor force. Okay, so the labor force consists of people who are employed and those who are unemployed. And if you remember from the introduction to macroeconomics course, we had a chapter on unemployment. And in the chapter of the unemployment, we talk about how this is computed. How can I classify people between employed and unemployed? And we said there is a survey where someone from the BLS is gonna knock your door and ask, are you working? And when you say yes, then you are here. And they don't care whether you're working full-time, part-time, but you're just working. So the quality of work is not part of this equation, right? So you're asked, are you working? Yes, then you are here. You are asked, are you working? You said no. Then the next question would be, when was the last time you've been looking for a job? And if you say over the last whatever, a certain benchmark that is less or equal to 4 weeks, then you are classified as unemployed. So if your answer, no, I'm not working, but I have been looking for a job over the last 4 weeks, then you are considered as unemployed. Okay. If you've been looking for a job over the last 5 weeks, 6 weeks, you are not part of the labor force. So you are not part of this equation. So the labor force, LF, E for employment or employed, U for the unemployed. So as I said, the intensity of work is not part of this equation. The quality of work is not part of this equation. If you work as a CEO or you work as a part-time, then this is not part of the equation. You're just working. Another important statistic, which is the one that we had on the previous slide, which is the labor force participation rate. So it has to be a certain rate, and it's the labor force divided by the civilian population 16 years and older, not in institutions. So you're not part of a hospital, you're not part of the army, and so on. So that's why we call it civilian adult population 16 years and older, not in institution. So the census population survey, so they do a survey, and one of the things also they collect in the survey is the employment population ratio. And as you can read it, so it's employment divided by the population, and it's a ratio. So you can multiply times 100 to get it in terms of a percent. Unemployment rate, again, it's a rate in terms of a percentage. So once you have the number of people who are unemployed, you divide it by the labor force participation, then you will be able to get the unemployment rate. In other words, what is the percent of those in the labor force that are unemployed? Okay, so the measurement of the labor force itself at many times can understate the actual number. Okay, so it could be the case that we have, for example, I'm just saying an example, 15% unemployment, but what is actually recorded is just 10%. So there is kind of a 5% gap, and this is just an example. So as I said, there is something called hidden unemployed. So someone who give up in their search. They are discouraged. They felt they have been looking for so long and they don't get any opportunities, so they are just fed up and they are discouraged, so they are out. So when the person from the CPS Census Population Survey is coming to your door and asking you, are you working? You say, no. And the next question, how long have you been looking for a job? And you say, oh, over the last 2 months, and I'm not working. Then you are not part of the labor force. Okay? So one of the important measures, or more accurate measures, is the employment population ratio. So it has a better measure of the fluctuation of economic activity. How many people are actually employed, how many people are fired, right, during a time of a recession, for example, or how many people are employed more during the economic boost, for example, or when the economy is expanding. So I'm assuming that all the terminologies that I'm saying are things that you have already covered in macroeconomics. Okay, so when we look at the statistics on the BLS, and whatever you see here on the slide, I want you to go ahead and just check it on the BLS. So the labor force participation is the greatest for all groups during this age. This is what we call the prime age, 25 to 55, where people are participating. Before that, they are probably in between jobs. They are not fixed in a certain job. They are not, they're probably studying, and after that, this is the time when they start thinking about retirement age. Of course, people participate more if they spend more on their education. So people with a PhD or master degree, they have a higher chance of finding a job. Okay, so their participation rate is higher than people with less years of education. Another important fact is that the labor force participation decreased for men over the age 65 from 46% in the 1950 all the way to 25%. So those who are above the age of 25, their participation rate has decreased over time. So they used to stay longer on the market, but now they started to retire relatively earlier. And again, all these statistics you can go ahead and check. Important fact is that if we are talking about part-time, then we will see more participation of females than males. And it makes sense because females, okay, when they marry and or they have kids or they are taking care of elderly people, they don't have that much of time flexibility. So it's easier for them to have a part-time job than a full-time position. When we look at high school dropouts, we will find that men have better privilege. So you have more men who are high school dropouts who find a job or work than females. Also, you will find that in terms of race, Black men tend to have the lowest participation rate, and Asian men have the highest participation rate, and this is in terms of race. So looking at the average weekly hours of work of production workers from 1900 all the way to 2013, and you have all the data on the BLS all the way up to 2024. So when you can see here, there is a decrease, right, in the average work week. So as we said in one of the previous slides, right, so people are working less and less and less over time. Okay, so the trend is negative over time. So in 1900 they used to work 55 hours per week, but here in 2020 it's, well, maybe this one is like 34 around hours per week.